Eagles. Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody. A Tuesday edition of Birds 365. The dust is settling after the NFL draft, and we're going to begin to look at the way this roster looks. We have a good show planned today with my partner, John McMullen. We have Tommy Lawler in hour one. We have Ian Cummings, who's excellent on the NFL draft in hour number two. So he'll break down some of the Eagles draft picks for us in hour one. John, the draft is officially in the rearview mirror, and we move to the, I guess you could call it the lull point of the NFL calendar, getting there soon. So what's your first takeaways from the way the dust has settled? Obviously, some roster changes yesterday. 4 players get cut. So there's going to start to be some changes that are happening with the roster. How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, I mean, you got to make room. Obviously, the Eagles had a very small undrafted class, so only 7 guys. Howie talked about that, but they still had to do some maneuvering. It's always a bunch of future guys that sort of go. And they moved on from the time being. A lot of the Noah Ellis is a guy who's been here and been back. T.Y. Mullen's a guy who's been here and been back. So Lasida Smith has been here, and Griffin Abear. So not necessarily the end of the road for these guys. The Eagles have a dossier, but for now, they got to make room for all the young kids for rookie camp, and that's the way it goes. It's a tough industry, and there's always churn on the back end of the roster. This kind of stuff happens throughout the league. So it's not that big of a deal, obviously, unless it's a personal level to them. Obviously, it's a very big deal. But unfortunately, that's the way the NFL, and that's the difficult part of it.
Yeah, this is the bottom of the roster we're talking about. Any other players on this roster right now that you think? I know we talked about James Bradbury. I mean, they just signed 2 defensive backs. They drafted 2 defensive backs. Do you think James Bradbury is somebody that could be on the outs, or anybody else that is potentially a more prominent name? That's not somebody. I mean, these are, Noah Ellis, Griffin Abear. I've never even heard of Griffin, with all due respect to him. T.Y. Mullen and Lasida Smith. These are bottom of the roster guys. Is there anybody that you see them moving on from that has a more prominent role in the team?
Other than James, no. And there's no, I don't know why people are so just way over the top on they got to get rid. There's no need to get rid of James Bradbury right now. It's got to be post June 1st. Now you could do it for his sake, but that would have been done earlier. They haven't even gotten a look at Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper. Right. They haven't even gotten their helmets. I mean, there's no need. I expect things to go well, and I expect James Bradbury probably not to be here, to be honest. But there's no urgency to do it. There was never any urgency to do it. You certainly weren't going to do it before the draft if the board fell a different way and you weren't able to get one of the top corners. Now, they ultimately got 2, and we'll see where Cooper DeJean ultimately plays. I think he's going to be more of an inside player, slot, safety, nickel linebacker, that type of thing. But we'll see. We don't even know where they're going to use him. The numbers game doesn't look good for him now. Pre-draft, you had no idea. So there was no way they were going to get rid of him. And they'll probably try along the way to get a conditional late round pick, maybe a cornerback desperate team, because there's a lot of those that plays a lot of zone will bite. Probably not, and they'll ultimately release him. But there's no urgency to it. It's a 90-man roster. Settle down.
There's no savings, right? I mean, anything they do.
No, they're actually losing money if they do it now. But
and clarify if I'm wrong. The system that will be implemented this year on defense with new defensive coordinator Vic Fangio will suit Bradbury's style of play better. Yes or no?
Well, it's the same system essentially, so it's not changing. It's just going to be run better, I would say. Um, with Vic, I mean, Sean Desai is the disciple of Vic Fangio. He just doesn't do things as well as Vic Fangio. So
Right.
I thought the system last year was fine for him if you used him and utilized him correctly, but they were moving him around to the slot and things like that. Part of it out of necessity. So even flipping sides at corner when Darius Slay went down. And to me, he's a strict right corner. Just leave him out there, let him play zone, let him play. Very high football IQ, very instinctive, very savvy. That's what happened the year prior when he was a second team All Pro. Um, so I think Vic would have done that. But now that you've turned it over and you've gotten Quinyon Mitchell and even Cooper DeJean, I think that ship has sailed. But again, if they cut him today, uh, without a post June 1st designation, they lose a $10.8 million of cap space. If they
So
put
that's obviously not happening.
if they put the June designation, post June 1st, zero. So now from the player's perspective, and teams do this a lot earlier in the calendar before free agency starts. If you want to do the player a solid, you release them and you can designate it post June 1st. Now you don't get that relief until June 2nd,
Right.
but you just have to wait. You have to carry the contract through until June 2nd. And then you get that better ending. So they could have done that, but they didn't want to do that in March because they had no idea that they were going to have Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. So unfortunately, that's a bad outcome for James Bradbury, but you had to wait to see what happens. And now that you've seen what happened, it's very unlikely he's going to be back, but there's no necessity to do anything right now. So I wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of the player, but from the way it sounds, I would leave him as a, if anything, leave him as a backup. Leave him as a depth piece. He's
Well,
not.
I don't think he's a good backup either. I think he's a starter or not because he's not going to play special teams. As we said,
Okay.
he's not going to be versatile. He's not going to move around, and that's what you want from backup players, especially a corner. Your
Right,
backup
right, right.
corners. You look at Kaylee Ringo, Josh Jobe. This their two best special teams players last year. You and Zach McPherson in the past, their best special teams player, you could argue. If you're a backup corner, you have to play special teams, and James is not gonna play special teams at this stage of his career.
Sounds good. I want to thank everybody for checking in. We see everybody in the chat box. Always making the show a good show. So we appreciate all the people in the chat box, Crowley and Robert and Rob and Slagger. We see, and SMD. We see all you guys in the chat box. We appreciate it. John, positions they still need to add players. I have safety, linebacker, defensive tackle, maybe. I mean, I know they have Davis and Carter and Milton, but after there, it's a little bit of a crapshoot. Maybe tight end. Is that it? Is that it, or what do you think about positions they probably still need to acquire players?
You can't have everything. So we're talking about depth.
Well, I'm not talking about good players. I'm talking about depth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're talking about depth. I know everyone wants Justin Simmons, and I don't see stuff like that happening at this stage of the game. You never say never. If injuries pop up, things of that nature. Even Eddie Jackson. I remember when Eddie Jackson got cut in Chicago. Well, Vic, he's coming here. He's still going nowhere. So that tells you a lot. But big name trap, as we say. Certainly, you're not bringing in players like that to be backups, as we just talked about with James Bradbury. I still think the biggest need is right guard. The assumption that one day Tyler Steen's not good enough and the next day he is probably a specious one. So that makes Matt Hennessy more important. And I don't know if that's something Eagles fans want, because even though he was once an ascending player and playing pretty well in Atlanta, he's essentially wiped out 2 seasons with injuries, season and a half. So I wouldn't be comfortable. We talked a lot about linebacker, that, it's linebacker's not good enough, but I mean, that's partly by design. And by that, I mean, they just don't value it enough to bend over backwards to bring more certainty to the position. And that's just, you're going to have to live with it in this era of Philadelphia Eagles football until they change their mindset. Safety, I think, is a little bit better than people think, because I think Reed Blankenship's a better player than people give him credit for. I think, that undrafted tag is a tough one to shake, and people keep going back to it. Well, he was undrafted. Well, I've seen him play now, so I don't care that he was undrafted. The NFL got that one wrong. Clearly, he's an NFL player. And I think he was really showing signs of being a pretty good one last year. Needs to stay healthy. Obviously, he had 3 dings. Now he comes back. He misses a week and comes back, but still, you want him on the field as much as possible. C.J. Gardner-Johnson is back, and obviously, again, what are you going to do? Bring in somebody to be a backup, big name backup, who's got to play special teams, that doesn't want to play special teams. So I think a lot of this stuff is, there's a science to roster building. Role players are important, and you need to play a role. And I think people get caught up in, the best 53, because you hear that cliche all the time, doesn't exist. Because if you just take, again, the 5th wide receiver, if he can't play special teams, he can't be on your team. So it's nice if somebody like AJ or DeMonte gets hurt and you have a better receiver to come in, but that's part of, you can't legislate injuries, you can't build your team like that. And all of that factors into it. So they're far from perfect. They're much better on offense than defense. Sort of where we were before. And Mekhi Becton, I mean, look, the sense of urgency with Mekhi Becton tells you exactly where they were going into the draft. They thought they were going to get a tackle in day 1 or day 2, or somebody with tackle versatility to kick out. And they didn't get it. So the urgency increases.
John, any chance Mekhi Becton can play guard? Or would they look at that at all? Or is he – I mean, he just turned 25, I think, a month ago, and he's got 30 games plus of starting experience in the NFL. I know it's all at tackle, but any chance he's a guard? I have seen some of that on social media. I don't know if there's any truth to it, or if they would even consider going that route.
Yeah. The dude's 6'8". I mean, they keep getting bigger. Landon's very big.
Yeah, Landon's a big guy.
But,
I don't think he's Mekhi Becton size, but he's
boy,
big.
I mean, you're making it really difficult for Jalen Hurts to see passing lanes if you're moving Mekhi Becton inside.
Yeah, that's true. And Hurts isn't the tallest quarterback in the world.
No, and that's, they keep getting bigger and bigger, and, arm angles and all that kind of stuff. But no, I've never, Mekhi Becton's a natural tackle, and he's coming here to be the swing tackle, which I haven't had the past couple of years, because they've sort of one of the few teams that gone with a left and a right backup, Andre Dillard, and then Fred Johnson last year. And then Jack Driscoll was sort of the backup. Most teams have a swing tackle on game day. I think the Eagles want to get back to that. And that's going to be Mekhi Becton.
More draft breakdown coming up soon. We have our good buddy, good friend of the show, Tommy Lawler, who does tremendous work over at eaglesblitz.com, IGGLES blitz.com. Great work from Tommy all weekend long on the NFL draft. We'll get to him. I want to address our buddy in the stream, Rolando. Thanks for tuning in, Rolando. Don't forget to like the show while you're here. A little fan questions on Birds 365. I think that's stay tuned. We'll do that with Johnny Mack maybe once a week. I like that idea. I think that's a good idea. Have the fans a chance, as long as you're respectful, as John always says. We'll have a chance to
keep it
ask
clean.
Johnny Mack some questions and get your opinions in on what the fans want to hear us talk about. So we'll do that in the future. Thanks everybody for being here. Make sure you like the show. We're going to hit a timeout, and on the other side, we'll have Tommy Lawler from Eagles Blitz. We'll dive back into the draft and see what he thinks of the players the Eagles acquired, the roster, Mekhi Becton, and all that. So stay tuned on Birds 365. We'll be right back with Tommy Lawler.
Is the best vacation one that you find, or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights, or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm, or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
Listen, if we even think you owe us money, you won't know what hit you. We'll put liens on everything you own. Raid your bank accounts, retirement fund, pension. You'll open up your paycheck and cry because we'll already have the money. We'll haul you into federal court and you might even go to jail. Hey, it's our job.
Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. Our experts will fight for you using IRS guidelines to stop any IRS actions like bank levies or wage garnishments. Plus, eliminate penalties and interest and reduce your past tax bill so you pay the IRS less. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a tax doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
I'd have my mom call the number on the screen. You come see me alone. We'll work it out. Really, we will.
Philadelphia fans, we're cut from a different cloth. Born into a brotherhood and bonded to our team for life. We believe anything is possible because we've witnessed the impossible. While we may be from different neighborhoods, come Sunday, we are one and we will be heard. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles. EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to a Tuesday edition of Birds 365 following the NFL Draft. John and I are joined now by Tommy Lawler from EaglesBlitz.com. Tommy, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Tommy, good to see you, bud. I know you're a big draft guy, so I want to get right into it with the Eagles. Impressive to me. I grade things a little different. I grade things by decisions because none of us know what these players are going to turn into a year or two down the road. Eagles made a lot of good decisions in this draft from my perspective. So I'll start it. Favorite pick of Tommy Lawler, least favorite pick of Tommy Lawler.
Favorite pick is Quinyon Mitchell. No question about it. That's a guy that I really hope the team would be able to get. And I just didn't see a way that he was going to fall to 22. And what you had, it was a case there. I did not anticipate 6 quarterbacks going in the first 12 picks.
I don't think anybody did.
Right? So when that happened, you said, okay, we're dealing with some weird stuff. And then the first, I think it was 14 picks on offense.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, as you're watching it, you're sitting there and the thing we've always heard is teams try to have 5 names that they would like
Yeah.
at their pick. So you always have a list of kind of 5 guys, and as you get to pick 17 or 18, and you see Cooper DeJean still there, you see Quinyon Mitchell, Terry and Arnold, all your corners, and then you see there's a couple of offensive linemen there. You go, okay, they're going to get somebody good. And as things kept unfolding, all of a sudden, next thing you know, Quinyon Mitchell sitting there 22. Howie, who has very little self-control when it comes to the draft and wanting to trade up for guys in the first round, showed great self-control in letting the board play out and then letting that player fall to them. So they got a player that really is a great fit in terms of need. He gives them exactly what they want. He's good value. He's a terrific player at 22. And again, they did not have to move up to get him. So they didn't have to use extra resources. They got a player that really should be a big help. Least favorite pick? Boy, that's a tough one. I guess Will Shipley would be a guy that listen, it's all about personal bias. I want the Eagles to have a power runner.
So do I. I'm dying to see it, Tommy.
When I watched Jordan Howard a couple of years ago, it was the football equivalent of porn, right? A 225-pound sledgehammer running, and if you were in his way, he was just going to run over you. I loved watching that. So with Audric
Estime and LeGarrette Blount for the short.
That's who I was.
Yeah. With Audric Estime from Notre Dame on the board, that's the guy. If they wanted a running back, that's the guy I wanted, because he's a bigger guy who'll run over you.
Yeah.
So when they took Will Shipley, I was disappointed. Now, that's no insult to Will Shipley. It's just it's a question of, did you want steak or chicken, right? The Eagles took chicken. I wanted steak. And when you watch Will Shipley, he's a good player, but I wanted a sledgehammer. And instead, they got a guy who, in my mind, is more of a third down back type. And they already had that in Kenny Gainwell. So to me, that was a little bit,
By the way, to your point, Tommy, the Eagles only eat chicken these days. They look for the same thing. It's like, why? What happened to compliment? Yeah, you have guys who can catch the back,
right,
all out of the backfield. And Saquon Kenny, why not go the other way? And they undrafted kid from Georgia is a one cut back, but you're not expecting anything from an undrafted kid. I'm with you. It drives me nuts. They want to collect the same kind of running back, and it doesn't make sense to me.
Listen, the coaches, and it's hard to say how much of this is Howie and how much of the scouts, how much of the coaches, because the coaches are obviously, the scouts' job is to evaluate players and put grades on them. The coaches are kind of telling the front office what they want, and so there's a combination of both groups. We know the Eagles have this weird fetish with undersized athletic tight ends, and they just don't seem to work. Whether it's Grant Calcaterra, they've had a couple of guys that are undrafted players that they've brought in. This year they had the undrafted kid Castles from Tennessee. They brought in, and for some reason they just love the Alberto, who they traded for. They love the thought of these 245-pound tight ends that are really good athletes, and they just haven't panned out. And you're like, well, why do you keep going for it? Well, that's something that they to them, it's like buying a lottery ticket, and they just hope they're going to hit on one. Obviously, they like running backs that have a complete skill set. And if you watch Audric Estime, the kid I was talking about for Notre Dame, he has very little wiggle. You get in the ball, he's running a straight line. He's not going to make a lot of guys miss.
But that's what I want. I want a chain mover, man.
Will Shipley can make those guys miss in the hole, and there is value in that.
Yeah.
The difference is, it's funny, Will Shipley runs a 4.45. Estime ran 4.71 or something.
Yeah.
Estime had an 80-yard touchdown run last year. Will Shipley's longest play at Clemson was 53 yards, I think. So play speed and time speed are very different. But anyway, Will Shipley, I think he's a fine addition. Just he wasn't the guy I wanted.
Yeah, and I don't understand it from the perspective of, we don't have Brock Purdy or a quarterback like that. We have Jalen Hurts, who has shown that's not his game. He doesn't like to check the ball down to the running back. I don't know why they keep going for that from that perspective, but I digress. Tommy, you mentioned the patience of Howie Roseman on that first pick to wait for the board to come to him. I thought he showed tremendous patience on the second pick, waiting for Cooper DeJean, falls to 40. He makes his move, and then you see a small run on cornerbacks. I want to get your perspective on the player, Cooper DeJean, how you think he fits in Philadelphia, and how he's moved to go and get him at 40.
Yeah, Howie played the board great there, because when you have a talent that's falling, and he's not going to get to, I think the Eagles had pick 50. There's no way DeJean's falling to pick 50, right? So Howie knows there's teams ahead of 50 that want corners. So he knows he's not going to fall that far. So the question is, at what point is there a trade that's workable where the value you feel like is reasonable to pay to go get the guy? And Howie, listen, you can disagree with his moves. You can say he doesn't evaluate this position well or whatever you want. There's no question he has a great sense of value, and he does a great job of talking to other teams and being a good trade partner. And so when he was able to work out that deal and move up and get him, it's great in terms of value. Cooper DeJean is a player I liked quite a bit. I'm a big fan of playmakers. I want guys who can play the ball, get it, secure it, and then once they have it, they become offensive players. Buddy Ryan used to teach his defense. Our number one goal on defense is to score touchdowns, not force third downs, not sack the quarterback. It's to score touchdowns. And you want players that have that mentality. Once I get the ball, let's go try to score. DeJean has those kind of athletic skills and his instincts that when he gets the ball, he becomes a dangerous returner. The ball's in his hands and he's going to go make a play. So guys like that have real value. He's a very good athlete, 202 pounds. I think ran 4.44 at his pro day. And the only question is, where do you play him? Because he's versatile, but
Right.
versatile can also mean, does he have one position he's a great fit for, right? So there's a question and a strength there at the same time. I wonder if the Eagles might try him at slot in the nickel where he played at Iowa, because if you put him in there, you could then in the future have Keely Ringo and Quinyon Mitchell on the outside. He's in the slot, and you got three corners that all have size, talent, speed, and could be the secondary of the future. If not, they could put him at safety. They could put him at outside corner. They can sort of move him around and try different things and see what works best.
Yeah, with DeJean, it's going to be interesting to me where he's going to play. But to your point about Howie understanding the board, Tommy, Green Bay was at 41, and they immediately trade down. What does that tell you when the Eagles go up to get Cooper DeJean? And by the way, right after Cooper DeJean, corner,
Right.
Saints took Kool-Aid McKinstry. Houston took Kamari Lassiter. Arizona took Max Melton. And then the Packers, then it was the Raiders. The Packers ultimately got Edgerrin Cooper, who you could argue the Eagles could use as well, perhaps even more. But they're not going to do that from their perspective. So, yeah, he understands the market and what was about to happen at the cornerback position. And it was a tremendous move. But just to follow up on DeJean, and Jeff McClain got a lot of crap. He didn't deserve it because he asked that simple question. It's like, are they even going to give him an opportunity to play outside corner? Because there hasn't been a white outside cornerback since Jason Sehorn. It's been a while in the NFL. And they pigeonhole those guys, and maybe it's unfair. And is he even going to get the opportunity? I think he's going to be an inside player. And whether that means slot, he played what was called the cast position, what Iowa calls the cast position, which is sort of a hybrid safety linebacker. And I think the best opportunity for him to get on the field as a rookie, barring injury to Darius Slay or Quinyon Mitchell, which you hope doesn't happen, is sort of that nickel linebacker role. We all talk about the Eagles' weakness at linebacker, and it's a weakness. Maybe you only play one of them. Maybe you play big name nickel and three safeties in obvious passing situations. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, we'll see what Vic Fangio wants to do. He's going to get in there and he's going to take a look at his players, and he'll have options. Whereas last year there weren't. I guess technically they had options, they just weren't good ones. And so now with Quinyon Mitchell, DeJean, adding Gardner Johnson back in there. Reed Blankenship's another year older, should be a better player. Sidney Brown seems like he's ahead of schedule in his recovery. So there's going to be some things. Darius Slay is going to have a real chip on his shoulder. And then Keely Ringo is going to be in year two. Maybe, he can challenge for a starting role. So you're going to have some pieces to move around with and work with. And Avonte Maddox, if he can stay healthy. Avonte, we know, has talent, right? So it's just a matter of Vic Fangio saying, what's the best use of my resources? Who gives me the best, chance to succeed and and allow me to be creative. And the great thing about guys like DeJean is versatile, Gardner Johnson's versatile, Sidney Brown's versatile. These guys can play nickel and safety. They can slide around. So if the offense goes in motion and if you're playing a zone, they're not necessarily going to get a favorable matchup because you have guys that can move with them or not have to move with the motion and cover or blitz or do whatever you want on that particular play. So Fangio's going to have some interesting pieces to work with, and we'll just see what he and the coaching staff come up with. And there'll be some trial and error. There's going to be a few bumps in the road, but hopefully by the end of the season, he'll have a defense that kind of has found its footing and does some things well, as opposed to last year when they started mediocre and they just finished horribly.
Tommy, I want to ask you about their third-round pick, Jalix Hunt. There's a lot of conversation. They overdrafted the player. It's a project type of player, not anticipated to have any sort of role this year as he's very unpolished. What did you make of that pick? Did the Eagles reach for that pick, or do you like the player and do you think he's a good fit here in Philadelphia?
Yeah, so Hunt's an interesting player because he comes from such a small level. Houston Christian, formerly Houston Baptist, is tiny college. Before that, he played at Cornell. You watch his game
safety at Cornell, by the way.
Right. And so, he's a project. There's no question about it because he's come from such small school football. And a few people hit me up on social media, said, hey, this is Davion Taylor part 2. And I said, no, those are very different players. Davion Taylor, due to religious reasons, couldn't play football in high school until his final year, and then went to Colorado and was able to play because he's just such a big, athletic, natural kid. Hunt's been playing sports and he's like 9 or 10 years old. He's played football. It's just that even in junior high or early high school, he's 5'7", 170 pounds. He had a late growth spurt, which pushed him from the secondary to a linebacker and then eventually defensive end. So he's new to defensive end, but he's not new to football. And the other thing is defensive end is a position. There's 2 positions that are the most natural in all of football. I could take you 2 guys and make one of you a defensive end and one of you a running back. Those are positions you just go on feel and instinct because the defensive end, go get the quarterback. So that's not complicated. Running back, going to hand you the ball and avoid the guys in the opposite color jersey. That's not complicated.
Yeah, you don't want to put me there, Tommy. I've aged out.
Either.
Listen, I'm putting Zander as my pass rusher, and my friend, you're going to take a beating because we're gonna run you.
All 5'10", 175 of me at the pass rusher.
And that's the thing with Hunt. So he is a project, but he's in a position where it's okay to be a project because athleticism is crucial to that position, right? He doesn't have to have polish and instincts. They can teach him pass rush moves. They can teach him things. They can't teach his burst, his closing speed, his agility. That stuff you're born with or you're not. And he's got it. He's developed it. It's interesting. He's 6'4", 252 pounds. He had a great showing at the combine. If you go back in Eagles history, there's another defensive end who was 6'4", 252 and had a great combine. You know who I'm talking about, John?
Mike McMullen.
There you go. The difference is Mike McMullen was taken, 8th overall?
Yeah. And by the way, wasn't a bad player. He was actually a solid player. He was just overdrafted.
He was overdrafted, and of course, he had the curse of we passed on Warren Sapp to get him, and so that's you're going to be having to deal with that baggage for your career. If they had taken him in the 3rd round and he had 35 career sacks, you'd say, all right, that's not a bad pick at all.
Yeah. I used to have that argument with Jody, with Derek Barnett. It's like if he's a 3rd round pick, you go, oh, that's a solid rotational player. But he was a 1st round pick.
Exactly. And with Hunt, so he's got functional size. He showed physicality at the Senior Bowl that was the first time he was really going up against grown men and not. When you watch his game tape, he's just destroying kids out there because the kids that Houston Christian were playing, as Daniel Jeremiah referred to him, I think the other day, he called them civilians. You're playing against bankers and insurance guys
or something. Yeah.
And so he's just destroyed those guys. When he went to the Senior Bowl, you see him going up against 310, 320-pound offensive tackles and holding his own and being able to drive them back or on run plays to hold his ground. So there's strength and physicality there. They just have to teach him. So to me, this is a fine pick. Listen, I had him rated lower than a 3rd round, but that's because it's so hard for those of us on the outside to evaluate small school players because when you watch the game tape, it's weird to watch because it's just non-competitive.
Yeah.
when he took off. And you watch some of the hits he had on quarterbacks, and it was you felt bad for the quarterbacks.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just destroying people, and you're like, it's almost like a bully, right? Well, he was just a guy that was so far beyond the competition that was a little crazy. But I have no problem with them spending the pick that they did on him, and especially knowing it's such an interesting position. If you can develop a pass rusher, the impact those guys have, and 6'4", 252, that's good size, and the guy's a legit athlete. So
Yeah.
get him and see what you can turn him
Now,
into.
because I've heard, to your Taylor point, Tommy, and I've heard that as well. I'm not talking about comping player to player. I mean, I think that's silly in any indication. People say, "Oh, Ohio State quarterbacks can't play," and then all of a sudden, C.J. Stroud shows up as a rookie. It's got nothing to do with Art Schlichter and anybody else you want to bring up from down the road. He's got nothing to do with it. Jalen Hunt's got nothing to do with Davion Taylor and vice versa. My comp is taking a project on day two. That it's late. I think it's nitpicking a little bit, but most of Howie's decisions I agree with. Taking a project with a premium pick, I don't know. That one I think you can question a little bit.
Sure, and that's fair. Absolutely. It's not like this is a slam dunk. No, you couldn't pass on him. The one thing I'll say is they made it clear that Vic Fangio advocated for this guy strongly.
Yeah.
And so this is a player that the coaching staff aggressively wants to work with. Go back to Davion Taylor. The coaching staff did not like Davion Taylor. And so the coaching staff, that's just.
I think they liked him as a person. Good guy.
I'm talking about they weren't keen on him as a project.
Yeah.
And so that was a pick that the scouts said, "Hey, let's get this guy. He can work." The coaches didn't buy in, and so you had a player that didn't develop because I don't think the coaches really believed in him. Well, here you have a player that's going to be a project. The coaches we know said, "Listen, go get us this guy." So I'm okay if the coaches are going to Howie and saying, "Listen, this is somebody we really want to work with. Get him. We think we can turn him into something." I'm okay with that. Again, it's a third round in what's overall not a great draft class. So. And looking at the board, there wasn't anybody that I was just dying for the Eagles to take. Comes the players that kind of had interest in it had been picked off at that point. So
Peyton Wilson. Wilson. And you know who took it? You know who took Peyton? Andy Waddle.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Well, clearly the Eagles, I'm guessing, just didn't have him on their draft board.
I'm guessing so too, but that concerns me too, because those UPMC, I mentioned this on the show, that's like one of the go-to places for sports. James Bradley works there. Joe Maroon works there. That's always been one of the go-to places for people that don't know when it comes to medical orthopedic stuff in the NFL. And they cleared them. So I put a little note in there and say, But I think it's more the Eagles just don't stinking value the linebacker position. That's where I go. Yeah,
I don't know. Listen, they didn't bring Peyton Wilson to Philly for a visit, so they had concerns. And listen, he may have been a player that Fangio said he's not exactly what I'm looking for. I'd rather have the pass rusher, and we'll get somebody later. And so, we'll see. Listen, the Eagles needed to improve at linebacker. That's one thing I was disappointed in, is just adding Jeremiah Trotter Jr. in the fifth round. I was hoping for more than that. So there's no question that's something that I don't think they did a great job of. But listen, getting two cornerbacks that early, that's not something I counted for as a possibility.
No.
So if you tell me they can go get Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell, and then you got to wait on linebacker, listen, I'll take that deal every day of the week.
Tommy, is that too much stock, though, in what the coaches say? We've had 4 defensive coordinators in 5 years.
No,
if you're making a pick in the third round, which is a premium pick because your defensive coordinator says he likes the guy, is that the right philosophy to approach that pick with?
Yeah. So again, it's not a case of this is a player that had a 6th round grade and Fangio saying you got to go get him. You got to go get him. They obviously had a high grade on him, and other teams had good grades on him. I mean, Daniel Jeremiah had him rated as the 60th best player or something like that. he wasn't going to last much longer. So when the coaches tell you, "Hey, listen, to somebody we want," um, I have no problem with that. If the coaches were pushing for him and he was a late round pick, that'd be different. But if the Eagles had him on their draft board, and he was good value, and you have a choice between A, B, or C, and the coaches say we really want B, not A or C, then I have no problem with that. That's because they're going to coach the player, and
Makes
players
sense.
are only going to succeed if there's a real synergy between the guys drafted them, the guys coaching them, and then the player themselves. So, if they had passed on a legitimately better player, there's no question about to take him. That's when you have a problem, and we've seen that before, where teams don't listen to their boards and they start making decisions based on whims, and things have gone haywire, and we've had some bad draft choices throughout history because of that. If the guy's valued there, then the coach advocates for him, that's not a problem in my mind.
Going back to your and you're right, you're 100% right. You generally have a cloud of prospects in the first round, so you want a group of 4 or 5. And depending when you're 22, and if you're not moving up, you're at the behest of others on how many that in that cloud are going to be there. Howie was pretty honest on day 3 when he was asked about the offensive line, and it was Bo Wolf who asked him basically before the draft, if you asked him, would you be surprised if you didn't have an offensive lineman until day 3? And Howie's like, yep. He thought he was getting an offensive lineman. The urgency with which they used to sign Mekhi Becton after the draft, I mean, immediate. Does that tell you anything about the Eagles' original plans?
They wanted an offensive tackle. There's no question about it. It was a good tackle class. So you think, okay, one's going to fall. But again, Cooper DeJean fell. They went up, got him. If they stay at 50, if they have picks 50 and 53, one of those might have been an offensive tackle. But when they saw DeJean fall, they said, man, that's a guy. Howie said in an interview yesterday that I think they had 24 players rated as first rounders. So when you get to pick 40 and one of those 24 is still there,
Right.
man, that's great value. And you say, would I rather have we can go get a second round offensive tackle at 50 or 53, or I can trade up and get a first round corner at pick 40. So, you're sitting there and, again, it's like going to the grocery store and your wife tells you go buy some pork chops. You get there and ground beef's on sale and it's so cheap. You're like, that's just too good a deal. I can't pass on that. We'll have pork chops next week. And so Howie, I don't think there's any way in his mind he thought Cooper DeJean is going to be on the board at 40. So when he went and got him. So he's going to secure the secondary, and he knew that means that he's going to have to neglect some other areas. So offensive line all of a sudden got pushed to the back burner. But that goes back to the thing he always says is you're always looking for talent. You have other options. So when you don't get the player in the draft, that's when you say, okay, let's go get the guy who's on the street as a free agent. And so that's where people fall into this trap of, well, the Eagles have to draft an offensive tackle in this draft. What if one's not available? You can't then just go force it, take the highest rated available, because what if he's not a good player? What if the coaches don't believe in him? Yeah. Then you're doing yourself a disservice.
No, I don't have any problem with Howie's decisions. Like I said, Tommy, they generally make sense. I brought up Andy before, and this is the reason. If I'm going to read off this draft, Troy Patano at 20, Zach Frazier at 51, Roman Wilson, the potential slot receiver from Michigan at 84, Peyton Wilson at 98, Mason McCormick at 119. If you just woke up out of a coma, you would think that's an Eagles draft. And that was Andy Weidl's draft in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And it was right before the Eagles.
Okay, right.
Yeah. Fautano 120. Now the Eagles moved up, so Zach Frazier, but that would have been a nice interior guy for the offensive guard. Obviously looking for that wide receiver 3. They took a flyer on Anaya Smith in the 5th round. Roman Wilson, I thought, would have been a great fit. We talked about Peyton Wilson, and McCormick's an interior player from South Dakota State I liked.
Yeah.
That to me looks like an Eagles draft. So I do think, you know, you got to pivot. I think that's what Howie's best at. His contingencies are really, really good. I think that's what he's
I'll
best
disagree with you on one point. So you talk about that draft. The Steelers needed starting caliber players for their offensive line. The Eagles' offensive line, as of today, you know, if you project Tyler Steen at right guard, they've got solid starters everywhere.
Well, the
they
Eagles have a top
players,
5 offensive line, but clearly,
they needed players. They need a right tackle of the future, and they needed depth and competition on the inside.
well,
So
I think if they would have gotten Platano, I
mhm.
think that's your starting right guard, and ultimately he kicks out to replace Lane. I think that's the plan. Now maybe it turns into a Landon Dickerson situation where he's so good at right guard you don't move him down the road, and you got to end up finding a right tackle. But I think that was the plan. I think, and Howie will be honest at some point. He generally lets us know on who that cloud of prospects is. He's never going to be honest about who Quinyon Mitchell forever is entrenched. He was the guy we wanted.
Right.
But we'll get a good feeling of who that cloud of prospects was. I get the hunch it was Spatano, but it doesn't matter. I mean, nobody gets, if you're a 22 and you get one of the group, back in the Devontae Smith year, he was the last of the cloud of prospects that they thought they were going to get, and they moved up ahead of the Giants to get him. It's worked out beautifully. Doesn't matter. First, last, indifferent. I think the same thing's going to happen with Quinyon Mitchell. I just bring that up because the swiftness with which they acted with Mekhi Becton tells you how much they wanted an offensive lineman. Could have been second round, could have been that second pick.
Sure.
But they wanted to come out with an offensive lineman with that guard tackle versatility. But the contingencies are great. That's why I'm trying to nitpick, Tommy. I'm sick of lauding Howie.
Well, listen, you know, the one thing we can say, Howie's great at draft value. What we have to find out now is if some of these value picks can pan out. Kobe Dean in the 3rd round looked like a steal. Well, he hasn't done a whole lot, right?
Yeah.
Nolan Smith looked like a steal at pick 30 last year. Didn't do a whole lot. Now, part of that's the coaches. You know, they had so many guys at edge rusher that he kind of got lost in a shuffle. It feels like there's a more concerted effort to get him on the field this year. So this year will be a better indication of where he is. But perceived value on draft day is one thing, and Howie is great at it. But you need to see those guys start to pan out a little bit. And Andre Dillard was a guy that we thought there's no way he's going to be there.
Tremendous value.
The Eagles took him, didn't turn out to be a particularly good player. So value is great, but we need to start seeing some of these guys pan out, or at some point, then Howie's going to have to say, you know what, maybe these guys are sliding for a reason. The rest of the league knows something that we don't, and we need to start paying attention to that. So, because you're always looking, you always want to, you know, look at your successes, study them, see what do we do right. Let's learn from that. You also want to look at your failures and say, what did we do wrong, and how can we address this in the future? And is there something? Do we have a blind spot? You know. And so it'll be interesting to see how Nolan Smith does this year, how Nakobe Dean does this year, and we'll see how Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean do, you know, because these great value picks. Value's nice when we're talking the Monday after the draft,
Right.
but 3 years from now, we need players, right? Value goes out the window 3 years from now. That's when you need players. So that's kind of if you want to nitpick and say that's something to watch, there you go.
Yeah, the evaluation really starts now on what these guys can do. Tommy, I want to ask you about day 3, which is a depth day. Obviously, it's a later in the draft or more looking for depth pieces, taking flyers on potential physical attributes. Did anything stick out to you on day 3 that you liked? Any players jump out the screen? I know Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is obviously the fan favorite, but any players from day 3 that you like?
Well, you know, let's talk about Jeremiah Trotter Jr. for just a second. I hope fans understand that he is not his dad in any way, shape, or form, right? Jeremiah Trotter was 6'3", 260 pounds, ran a fast 40, had an amazing career. He would have been possibly a first-round pick, but he had terrible knees, and he went to Stephen F. Austin. If he went to Clemson and had clean knees, he might have been a top 20 pick. Instead, the Eagles got him in the 3rd round in 1998. So his son, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., goes and plays at an elite football school, is healthy, has no issues, and is a 5th-round pick. So that tells you he's just not the same physical specimen that his dad was. Not how many guys are 6'3", 260, fast.
And by the way, those players like Trot, the original Trot, Tommy, don't exist anymore in the NFL. There's a reason, there are no 260 pound linebackers who are bullies.
Right.
If they are, they're getting 15-yard flags multiple times a game.
Penalties every other play. Yeah.
And that's the thing, if you remember, if you could go back and watch his dad play, watch some highlights, one of the things that he specialized in, he would just attack downhill. So at the snap of the ball, he would read the offensive lineman, he would just go take off, and he would run into an offensive lineman and just try to blow the play up.
Yeah.
His son is not that guy. He's 228 pounds. And so he's going to need Jordan Davis to occupy blockers and allow him to flow to the football and make tackles. He's a good blitzer. He shows a good feel for coverage. He's got really good range. You watch him make sideline to sideline tackles, but sometimes he'll get stuck on blocks when he's trying to play the inside run. Sometimes he makes sloppy reads, kind of guesses where the ball is going and will get in the wrong gap. And then his tackling can be a little bit erratic at times. So there's things to clean up for him. So anybody projecting he's going to come in here and definitely start right away and be this impact player, I don't see that happening. Listen, it'd be a great story if it did, but his name is not in his legacy. That's not going to get him on the field. It's going to be performance. So I'm curious to see what he'll do.
100%. And I hope it works out because it'll be a great story if he turns into a player. I will say this, and it's at Lawler NFL. Make sure you follow Tommy. Does a tremendous job, tremendous knowledge of this organization and its history. EaglesBlitz.com. You can read them there. That both of their 5th-round picks, and I add, and this is rare. I add Anaya Smith into that as well. They both have opportunities. They're not guaranteeing anything, but the Eagles need an upgrade at that wide receiver 3 position, mainly the slots. Paris Campbell, we've seen enough of Paris Campbell. The light's not coming on.
Yeah.
I mean,
How dare you?
He might be competent. He might be better than Quez Watkins, but there's a limit. There's a ceiling there. My concern about Smith is he's a manufactured touch player. I've seen no evidence that this organization can take advantage of that type. And then with Trotter, as you kind of alluded to, you have that assumption that he's going to be his father, which is unfair to him. But what he might be is better than Devin White or even Nakobe Dean. It wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world, mainly because those guys haven't played well. And Nakobe hasn't played a lot.
Devin White's been a good player. He wasn't good last year. He had flashes last year, but Devin White's been a good player in this league. There's no question about it.
Well, he was a good player. I would argue, Tommy, he was a good player. He was a great player for their run towards the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Talking to people in Tampa, everything else has been a disappointment. Now, he had the 9-sack season, so he got those Fugazi votes for Pro Bowl or All Pro, whatever he was. A tremendous athlete, but he lived up to it on that run to the Super Bowl, but nothing else. Everybody in Tampa's got nothing good to say.
No, listen, if you go watch certain games, you see a good linebacker. If you watch the season opener last year against Minnesota, he played well. It was a good performance. That's a good player. If you watch other games, you see him struggle. There's no question about it. The guy got benched for a reason. Okay. A 5th-round pick coming in and outplaying him right away, that's not likely to happen. Possible, of course. You never know. When the pads go on, the lights go on, crazy things happen, and some guys just thrive. And Jeremiah Trotter Jr. could turn out to be a good player. Like I say, it'd be awesome if he did because it'd make a compelling story and it'd be really interesting. So, be fun to watch him. Anaya Smith, I'll disagree with you on Anaya Smith. Listen, that's a guy I wanted the Eagles to target. That's a player that I when you watched him play, he jumped off the tape to me because of his run after the catch ability. And so that's a guy that can go play in the slot, can get open, he can play outside. He's a good returner, and he's dangerous with the ball in his hands. And that's, the Eagles always, it feels like, struggle to get run after the catch yards. And so that's an area where he can help them. If they're going to throw those screens, throw them to a guy who's good at them and let him make some plays for you. So I like him. The only reason he went in the 5th round, he had some injury issues that pushed him down a little bit. He to me, he's a better player than that, but yeah, he was good value at that point.
Yeah, he's also a 4.55 guy. So this league and receivers and
no, everybody's in love with the 40 time, right?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
The other thing that I'll say is the guys that they took late. I think Howie said, listen, you need to take guys that are a little bit unusual, and I think he hit the nail on the head. Johnny Wilson, when the Eagles brought him in for a visit, I thought, oh man, don't take this guy in the 3rd round. That's not. It's just big receivers have a history of failing in this league. For every Plexico Burris, there's 10 guys that were 6'6", 230 that did nothing.
Yeah.
And so when they brought him in, I said, no, don't take that guy. Well, in the 6th round, that's a different story. That's where you do take him and take a chance on him, see what he can do. And then Dylan McMahon, 6'3", 299, and maybe the most athletic center in the whole draft, and a guy that is, has a lot of Kelsey qualities. Now, he's not going to be Jason Kelsey.
6th round, almost the exact
right?
same pick, Tommy.
Listen,
no pressure. Athletic.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. Does he have a brother?
Yeah.
So he's got a chance to come in and compete for a backup role. He's not going to have. I don't think he's going to have Howard Mudd fall in love with him, making the starter right away, the way that Kelsey did, and the rest is Eagles history. But Dylan McMahon can come in here, challenge the Eagles. One of the things that we don't talk enough about with Kelsey, as good a player as he was, he didn't get hurt. He didn't come off the field.
Oh yeah.
And so Cam Jurgens is a human being. Jason Kelsey's, I don't know what he is, but he's not a human being. So they're going to need a backup center. Who's the last backup center to start a game for the Eagles? You'd have to go back a ways.
I think it's David Molk, but I have to look.
I don't know, man. You have to go back a long way. So having a guy like McMahon to come in and challenge for a role as a backup center, that's good. And again, the guy's a really good athlete. We know Stoutland loves athletic guys. So if anybody's going to know how to take advantage of an undersized player, that's Stoutland. You give him an undersized athlete. He obviously did some good things with the guys the Eagles had in recent years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tommy, I'm a little too high on a 5th round pick that the Eagles made in Trevor Keegan, the guard out of Michigan, 3-year starter, 37 starts, won the national championship, was a captain on that team. Tell me why I should not be this high on a 5th round.
He's got great hair too. He's got great hair.
He's strong. It looks like he could be a great guard in this league. Am I wrong to be high on that player?
Yeah, a little bit. He's a lunch pail guy, right? I was just watching some all 22 of him last night, and you watch the guy and he comes.
He's a phone guy, Tommy. I don't see the Stoutland.
So the Michigan part of it is the style of offense. They didn't do a lot where he got out and did wide pulls. They did short pulls.
Yeah.
So when you see him do short pulls, he's effective on those. I was just watching a play against Penn State where they had a running back go downfield. He went downfield. So he's 20 yards downfield and he's trying to find somebody to block and he just can't. He doesn't have the body control while at full speed to slow down and hit the guy. So he kind of went for a couple of guys and he didn't make good contact with anybody. So, just being a bully out in space, there's some skill to that. And that's why when you see Jason Kelsey hit those guys 20 yards downfield, man, It looks easy, but boy, it's not. Yeah. And so with Keegan, like I say, he's a lunch pail guy that he's gonna give you max effort on every play. He's gonna play with good leverage. He's always gonna find somebody to hit. He doesn't just stand and watch. But he's not special physically in any way, shape, or form. He doesn't have great size. He's not like 330 pounds. He's not a rare athlete. So he's a guy that, to me, I think could eventually develop into a starter. But I just think he's got a real limited ceiling. But listen, there's room in this league for lunch pail guys. Those guys can play for 10 years.
Oh, yeah. I think he might be the new Jack Driscoll. Jack was more tackle than guard, but similar, not the best athlete, but solid player, solid backup. I think he's got a chance to be a solid backup, more guard than tackle, obviously.
Oh yeah, no, I haven't. He did start one game at left tackle at Michigan.
Yeah,
I haven't gone to hunt that down to see what his footwork looked like. When you watch him in pass protection at guard, solid, but like one of the reps last night, Chop Robinson lined up across from him, and Chop Robinson just blew right by him.
Yeah, wow.
Now
Yeah.
Chop's an
Yeah.
exceptionally good athlete. Now to Keegan's credit, he knew he was beat, and he still got up and tried to ride him wide, and he allowed McCarthy to get the pass off. But when you watched him go against an elite athlete on the inside, man, he was struggling. So he's going to have some issues. But again, he's a lunch pail guy. He's going to come in and give you what you expect, and he's a high character guy, like you said, a team captain. So there's room for those guys.
Red Star. He's one of my Red Star. Howie said he got 5 Red Star guys.
So, yeah. That was interesting.
Yeah, I'm going to guarantee he was one of them. Will Shipley was one of them.
Right.
And then you can debate the others. But get 5.
We'll save that for the next visit.
Yeah. Sorry we kept you so late. At Lawler NFL, you're a high character guy. You're a Red Star guy.
Wow.
Everything.
We need to drug test that, man.
We want. Yeah. EaglesBlitz.com. Make sure you follow Tommy. Look at his thoughts. He's got his take on the Eagles signing of Mekhi Becton, which we talked about a little bit. And that's all of a sudden you get, who knows what he could turn into with Jeff Stoutland's tutelage. Hopefully the Jets didn't ruin him completely. And all of a sudden you may get your heir apparent at right tackle in a different way.
Hopefully he starts in the game 17 when the Eagles are resting their starters.
Exactly. You don't want to see him, but that's pretty good depth, I will say.
Oh, absolutely.
That is pretty solid depth. 1 year, $5.5 million. And that's worth up to $5.5 million. So we'll see the
he got McMullen money. Yeah.
Official details. And that's what, getting back to our discussion with Devin White, by the way, buddy, that's what I'll point to. Look at the contract. There's 31 other teams. If you were that good.
Oh, I didn't say he was a good player right now, but I'm saying he's done.
Yeah, he's got potential. He's got potential just like Becton. There's no doubt about it. But that's the best athlete the Eagles have had at linebacker since at least Michael Kendricks. And I don't know who you want to go back to before that.
I can't believe you're going to skip the whole Nate Gary era. Come on, man. People have feelings.
Nate Gary. By the way, I get people upset by this, Tommy, and I'm keeping you longer. I just apologize. I think Nate Gary's a good pick, a good draft pick. I think people don't understand how to judge draft picks. If you're getting a guy on day 3 that turns into a role player, a part-time starter, and gives you valuable snaps, Jim Schwartz loved Nate Gary. That's a successful draft pick. I'm sorry, people. Agree or disagree, Tommy?
No, yeah. I mean, what was it? Was his nickname Whitesnake? Is that what they called him?
Whitesnake.
No, they obviously, the coaches loved him. Was he a good player? No, he wasn't a good player. Was he a good draft pick? Because again, he was a good role player, special teamer. Did some things on defense. Yeah, that's fine. And because one of the things I stress to people, not every pick is going to be a starter, right? We know that. What did Howie say? 40% of the first rounders fail.
Yeah.
The overall draft is probably higher than that. So you just have to be realistic. If you come out with a couple of starters, if you find a really good player, for every time you get a Jordan Mailata late, there's a ton of guys that just, they were here for a year or two and gone.
Yeah.
It's tough to make in the NFL. So if you can find a guy that can stay around for a few years and help your team win some games, do some things, yeah, that's a good pick. You don't want that at pick 20.
No,
but a 5th or 6th round pick that it carves out a role in your team and helps you win games. Yeah, that's absolutely
it's a sliding scale, and that's why,
exactly right.
With McMahon, don't expect the next Kelsey, but maybe you get a solid, serviceable player on day 3.
He doesn't have to be Jason Kelsey, but it needs to be better than Donna Kelsey. How about that?
That fair enough.
Okay.
All right, Tommy, thanks for joining the show, man. We appreciate everybody go read Tommy at EaglesBlitz.com. He does tremendous work over there. We appreciate you joining the show, Tommy.
Thanks, guys. Great to talk to you.
Thanks, Tommy.
All right, Johnny Mac. When we get back on the other side, we'll have Ian Cummings now, our number 2 from Pro Football Network, a great draft analyst. I'm sure he can give us great insight on some of these Eagles draft picks. And on the other side of the break, Johnny Mac, I want to talk to you about fan favorite Jeremiah Trotter Jr. and what his path to starting on the Eagles looks like. You've mentioned it many times on our recap on yesterday's show. There is a path. Even though he's a fifth-round pick, there is a path. So we'll talk about that on the other side of the break. Keep it locked in here on Birds 365. Don't forget to like the show, share the show, and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate all of you for listening, and we'll be back on the other side of the break.
Is the best vacation one that you find or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
Listen, if we even think you owe us money, you won't know what hit you. We'll put liens on everything you own. Raid your bank accounts, retirement fund, pension. You'll open up your paycheck and cry because we'll already have the money. We'll haul you into federal court and you might even go to jail. Hey, it's our job.
Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. Our experts will fight for you using IRS guidelines to stop any IRS actions like bank levies or wage garnishments. Plus, eliminate penalties and interest and reduce your past tax bill so you pay the IRS less. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a tax doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
I'd have my mom call the number on the screen. You come see me alone. We'll work it out. Really, we will.
Philadelphia fans, we're cut from a different cloth. Born into a brotherhood and bonded to our team for life. We believe anything is possible because we've witnessed the impossible. While we may be from different neighborhoods, come Sunday, we are one and we will be heard. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back into Birds 365, a Tuesday edition following the NFL draft. We just had Tommy Lawler on from Eagles Blitz, a great breakdown there. If you missed that, be sure to go and check it out after the show is over. And then coming up, Ian Cummings from the Pro Football Network, a great draft analyst. John, I always love when we have Ian on. I always am enamored by his ability to pick a prospect from the 6th round and dive
Stony Brook.
Yeah, and he just breaks it down, measurables, everything. It's pretty tremendous.
Yeah. So we'll get some Jalix Hunt info from Houston Baptist, now Houston Christian. Yeah, Ian's knowledge on the NFL draft, very few can match him. One of the best in the biz. So glad to get him one last time post-draft. Obviously, he'll break down not only the Eagles draft, which by all objective measures is a really good draft. Again, I tend to grade more decisions. It's nobody knows, but and we'll see how these players develop. As Tommy kind of pointed out, we all thought Nakobe Dean was tremendous value. Maybe
that was a good example of why you can't get too high on any post-draft breakdown.
And that was a 3rd round pick. So now we're talking about a 5th round pick. But where Tommy and I don't differ on a lot, but where we differ on one in that conversation was Devin White. There's opportunities here because Nakobe Dean is unproven, because Devin White has played the way he played in Tampa. Look, Mike Gill tells a great story when he was on the show. He tried to get somebody who covered the Bucks on his radio show. And they said to talk about Devin White when the Eagles signed him. And they said, you know what? I don't want to do it. I don't want to come on and say anything bad. And I got nothing good to say. And it has nothing to do with a person. It has to do with it as a player. So because of that discussion we were having with Tommy, I pulled up his PFF grades. And again, PFF is not the be all end all, but this is what I say about PFF. If they say you're playing well, you're playing well. If they say you're playing poorly, you're playing poorly. Here's Devin White in his 5 years. This is 5 years. Rookie year. 68th out of 90 off-ball linebackers. That was the high point. 2020, 62 out of 83. 2021, 79 out of 86. 2022, 74 out of 81. 2023, 80 out of 82. 80 out of 82. 80 out of 82.
I mean, how is he even starting if you're ranked 80th out of 80?
Well, he wasn't. He got benched. He got benched last year. But
that's right, he got benched.
My point is he signed a 1-year deal. This was the 5th overall pick in the draft. He was expecting to get $100 million in his second contract. He got $3.5 million.
Yeah, and they talked it up real big. The agents initially saying it was 7.5. It really is not 7.5.
No,
the chance he sees 7.5 is slim. So is he the guy you think Jeremiah Trotter Jr. has a chance to jump if it all works out for Trotter?
Yes, he's the guy. They're gonna give Nakobe one last chance to nail down to be the middle linebacker. So the guy you're trying to beat out is going to be Devin White, and that's not crazy. Any 5th round pick, is you said, there's some holes to, no doubt, Jeremiah Trotter Jr.'s game, and I would not bet on it, especially as a young player in a complicated defense. But, I talked about when we were talking about Cooper DeJean earlier. Look, I think they may play a lot of big nickel this year, projecting it forward, and have 3 safeties on the field with Nakobe Dean in obvious passing situations. I think that could be a way they go about it. But there's, that's why I say, if they drafted Edgerrin Cooper, if they drafted Peyton Wilson in a different world and he was medically cleared, I would say I would bet on those guys being day one starters. I would bet on them being day one starters. With Trotter, no, it's still unlikely, but there is an opportunity. There is an opportunity. That's all I'm trying to point out. And I would say there's more of an opportunity for him than even Cooper DeJean, not comparing the two as a prospects, just because of the roster.
Right.
And who's in front of them.
Right.
To play a lot early. There is an opportunity. Now he's got to play tremendously well in the summer. And it's still unlikely because he was drafted in the 5th round for a reason. But because of the weakness at the linebacker position, it's fair to point out that, hey, and remember, you're in a town who thinks TJ Edwards can't play linebacker. Well, he can't cover. He can't do this. He can't do that. He's been one of the best linebackers in football for 3 consecutive years.
I still, to this day, do not know why they didn't just sign TJ Edwards. He didn't get buku bucks. He got a regular contract that the Eagles could have afforded.
Yeah, well, they definitely could have afforded it. Yeah, I mean, that those even in NFL buildings, those labels are meaningful. And You got one guy who's the number 5 overall pick, and forever people are making excuses for him and saying, oh, he's the number 5 overall pick. He's a great athlete. And you still got people saying he's a good player. And you got one guy who was undrafted, who's a good player, and they say, oh, he's undrafted. I don't know. I look at what's going on the field. And then you have the outlier. The problem with White is you have the outlier. He was the number 5 overall pick for a 3-game span. And on the biggest stage, he was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers' best player in their run to the Super Bowl. Their best player. They had Tom Brady. He was their best player. Never before, never after. It's one of the weirdest anomalies in NFL history. Literally.
Is it too early to write him off? I mean, if based on what you just said, how could this guy stink? I mean, how could you be a player on a Super Bowl winning team that stands above the rest? You beat Mahomes in the Super Bowl. I believe they beat Mahomes that year in the Super Bowl.
It's one of the weirdest anomalies ever. Because he was a monster in that playoff run.
Yeah, and Jen in the chat points out he was a great player at LSU.
Well, he's the 5th overall pick. Obviously, he was a great player in college, but that's not really all that relevance. And by the way, think about this: in the divisional round, they beat the Saints with Drew Brees,
right?
And he had 11 tackles. 1 pass deflection, forced a fumble, intercepted Breeze in that game. Then in the NFC Championship game against the Packers and Aaron Rodgers, he had 15 tackles, recovered a fumble as they advanced to the Super Bowl. Then in the Super Bowl, as they dominated defensively, 12 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, game-sealing interception thrown by Patrick Mahomes. Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes.
See, this is why the college comment actually is relevant to me, because if he's a great player in college and he comes to the NFL and he just can't match up with the competition, okay, you see that happen all the time in the NFL. But he did it. He proved he could play at the NFL level at a high level. Where did it go? What happened to this guy?
But even during the season, during the regular season, and by the way, that's the 2020 season. He was 62 of 83. He did not play well during the regular season. Maybe he's one of those guys that gets psyched up for big moments. I don't know. But it's tough to get through the lesser moments. The next year, he had one of the lowest grades I've ever seen, 35.1, 79. I mean, it's been atrocious. Atrocious.
Are the Eagles done at linebacker, John, you think? Are they done adding to that position? Are they not going to do what everybody wants them to do, and that's get significantly better at that position?
No, I think this is it. Nakobe Dean, Devin White, and cross your fingers. And if you want to talk to yourself,
look,
guys who are the number 5 overall pick in the NFL draft can fail. You've seen a guy who failed in Tampa Bay. And by the way, think about who Tampa Bay's coach is. Todd Bowles, pretty good defensive coach.
Yeah, great defensive mind.
So I don't want to hear coaching and stuff like that. Guys who are the number 5 pick in the draft don't fail because they're not good athletes and they don't have NFL skill sets. It's other things. In his case, he's not very instinctive. He overruns plays. He's out of position, things like that. I think when people see him play, they're going to be so upset. It's going to multiply pretty quickly.
I mean, everybody's enamored by the name, but what I don't get is if they're moving to a 34 front, you need good linebackers.
There's no such thing. Stop with the 34. They play multiple variable fronts. That is my pet peeve, Zander.
All right, there you
They
go.
play 50 fronts and 40 fronts, 5-man fronts, 4-man fronts. 3-4 is an antiquated notion. Never 4 linebackers on the field. Edge rushers, edge defenders, call them what they want. Overhang players, Jonathan Gannon. God, I hate that terminology. 4-3-3-4.
I've heard it a lot this offseason. I really have.
Yeah, well, because it drives me insane. They're playing the same scheme they played the past 3 years. The same one. They might do it better because Big originated it, but they're playing the same scheme they played the last 3 years.
We'll get to a timeout. We have Ian Cummings on the other side. I see him waiting in the green room, a great draft analyst from Pro Football Network. We'll talk to Ian on the other side of the break, see what he thinks of the Eagles draft, of the Eagles' first couple picks, of the late round picks, and his breakdown really on what went down on across the whole NFL on draft weekend. So Ian Cummings coming up next. Stay tuned on Birds 365. We'll be back after the break.
Is the best vacation one that you find or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
Listen, if we even think you owe us money, you won't know what hit you. We'll put liens on everything you own. Raid your bank accounts, retirement fund, pension. You'll open up your paycheck and cry because we'll already have the money. We'll haul you into federal court and you might even go to jail. Hey, it's our job.
Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. Our experts will fight for you using IRS guidelines to stop any IRS actions like bank levies or wage garnishments. Plus, eliminate penalties and interest and reduce your past tax bill so you pay the IRS less. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a tax doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
I'd have my mom call the number on the screen. You come see me alone. We'll work it out. Really, we will.
Philadelphia fans, we're cut from a different cloth. Born into a brotherhood and bonded to our team for life. We believe anything is possible because we've witnessed the impossible. While we may be from different neighborhoods, come Sunday, we are one and we will be heard. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to Birds 365, a Tuesday edition following the NFL draft. We are joined now by Ian Cummings from Pro Football Network. Ian, thanks for joining the show, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. We finally have a full draft to review, so happy about that. I know for the months leading up to it, it's like, let's get this over with. Let's get it going. Yeah. So we finally
start next year. Who's the top of your big board next year, Ian?
Ooh, Luther Burden from Missouri. That wide receiver, man, he's good. We got a good wide receiver class on tap.
We always have a good wide receiver class.
I know, man. We're in a golden age. It's just how it is. But I won't get too far into 2025 because I'm already digging into that. We've got 2024 to review first.
Yeah. Who do you like best? We'll start there. Obviously, we're going to talk Eagles draft, but Who was your favorite draft?
Yeah, there were a few that stood out to me. The Bears, obviously, with the capital they got, I thought they did a very good job. I thought the Chiefs again did a very nice job getting value. Tried again. The Steelers really improved that offensive line. We got some talent at wide receiver too. So those are a few that stand out to me. I didn't really see too many drafts that I didn't like this year. There were a few that I was like could have gotten a little bit better value. The Falcons had some iffy decisions, particularly in round 1. I wasn't a big fan of the QB pick that they did, but overall, I thought it was a pretty strong class. The 49ers were another one. I thought they got great value. Pearsall was a little rich for me, but I think in that scheme, he can be productive. So overall, a good year, but the Steelers, the Chiefs, the Bears, a few other teams as well. At the top of my head, but it was a good.
Yeah,
I
love the Steelers draft. Well, I know Andy White well, and that looked like an Eagles draft. If you woke up and looked at it, you didn't know who drafted it. It looked like an Eagles draft. But to your point about the 6 quarterbacks in the first 12, 14 offensive players before a defensive player. How much did that surprise you?
That surprised me a little bit for sure. And, on one hand, like I would have expected it. If you told me that there was a class that this would happen, I would have expected this one because I thought this class was disproportionately stocked on the offensive side of the ball, right? You had that big 3 at wide receiver. You had the top offensive lineman. We were hearing that maybe 8 or 10 offensive linemen would go in round 1, right? So a lot of talent there. Brock Bowers as well, and then the QBs. So I knew defensive talent was going to get pushed down the board. I didn't think we'd have to wait until 15 to see the first guy go.
Ian, what did you make of the overall, before we get into some of the players, the Eagles draft? You just mentioned the Bears, the Steelers as some teams that got great value out of the NFL draft. Where do the Eagles rank on your big board of teams that did well during the draft? I know you said you liked what most teams did, but where do the Eagles fall for you?
Yeah, I'd say they were in the top half for sure. I think getting Quinyon Mitchell when they did was really impressive. And then Cooper DeJean in round 2 was a phenomenal. That was one of my favorite scheme fits for him. It was the Eagles or maybe the Seahawks would be a potential good scheme fit that I had in my mind. But the Eagles, Vic Fangio, I think he can fit very well in that system, either as a star defender. They can play him at safety. They can play him at cover 3 zone corner if they want to. So a lot of flexibility that you get with him. And then Jalix Hunt in round 3 was one of my favorite developmental edges at that point. And then on day 3 as well, I thought they got a lot of great value with Schroeder, with Johnny Wilson, and I. Smith was solid. The offensive lineman they got as well. So overall, it was a very strong class for them, I think. I want to see how some of those day 3 picks pan out and how they fit. But overall, I was pretty impressed.
When it comes to some of the tweeners that we kind of talk about with the versatility, sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes that's a bad thing. So I look at 2 particular players that you just mentioned in the Eagles draft, Cooper DeJean. Where are they going to start him? Where do you think ultimately his best spot will be in the NFL? And Johnny Wilson, who a lot of teams, at least some teams were thinking about moving him to tight end. The Eagles have already said, no, he's a wide receiver. Those 2 particular guys, when it comes to future positions and taking advantage of their versatility.
Yeah, for sure. I think for DeJean, the moniker of a tweener is a little bit more of a strength for him. Like he can play a lot of different spots. I think with his projection, obviously he played mainly corner at Iowa, but I think a lot of his best traits, the route recognition, the eye discipline, the range, the explosion and support, and when clicking and closing, the ball skills, the catch point as well, the overall playmaking instinct that he provides. I think all of those things translate really well at safety, and he's got really good pedal technique as well, very good efficient footwork on his click and close, plant and drive. So, I think safety can be a place where he makes a home pretty early on, but at the same time too, like I said, in cover 3 looks, like if you're playing zone where you play side saddle off the wide receiver a little bit, right, and just use his eyes to watch the quarterback and key in on intent, I think he can play very well there. So I could see a scenario where, Darius Slay, you let him play out this year, right? You got Quinyon Mitchell on the other side, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson as a nickel potentially, right? And DeJean can play nickel in certain looks, maybe if you have a bigger receiver as well, but I think he can play safety as well. So I could see a situation where DeJean switches between nickel and safety early on, and then can play some corner looks and zone schemes as well. But for Johnny Wilson, the tweener label is a little bit more precarious, right? Because he's a little too big. And, for his size, I think he does have good separation ability. I think you see some of the ways that he can chop his feet on stems, it curls and hitches, right? He's got some good stopping ability, good decelerative capacity as well. He's explosive. He's got vertical speed, right? The frame is dominating for sure. But there are times when, naturally at 6'7", you are going to play a little bit too tall a lot of the time, right? And especially when you need to sink your hips and redirect on in breakers, right? Like not always the smoothest on those. So there are a few concerns I have with his overall translatability if you want to run a full receiver route tree, right? I could see him being a move tight end potentially, kind of switch between receiver on the boundary and certain looks and then playing with move tight end a little bit as well. I think you want to indulge that versatility because he's a very good blocker in the slot as well. Kind of that front line blocker role would be very good for him, but at the same time too, he's got some rack ability. So his is a little more interesting, his projection, but I think there is enough talent where you can indulge that and make the best of it.
Ian, the controversial pick in Philadelphia has been the round 3 pick. You mentioned that you liked him as a developmental player. I think a lot of people had a problem with taking a developmental player with that premium pick at the end of the 3rd round. What do you think of the pick there at that position, value-wise, and then what do you think of the player as a whole?
Yeah, so he was my 87th overall player, actually, prospect in the class. So that was good value for him. That was a round where I would have taken him. And I think for the Eagles, too, because you still have some contracts that are due to be up in 2025 at the edge spot, right? You got Bryce Huff, you got Nolan Smith in round 1, but, the book's still out on that one. So, there's still a little bit of long-term uncertainty there. So I think round 3, getting a guy with the traits that Jalen Hunt has was very appealing to me. So that was actually a good pick. I liked that pick a lot. There is going to be a learning curve for him. I think, he played safety to start his football career, and he only transitioned to full-time edge like 2 or 3 years ago, right? So, it's been a pretty, not a big runway for him to the NFL, and he was already productive at Houston Christian, right? But the physical palette of tools is what really intrigues me, right? Because 6'4", over 250 pounds, 34.5-inch arms, and then he tested as an elite athlete. We're talking elite explosion numbers. He ran in the 4.6s with the 40-yard dash. So you can see that speed and bend, working up the apex, right? Stressing angles right off the snap. He's got that burst. He's got that pursuit speed. And then their reps as well. The modern NFL is all about disguise and coverage looks. He can actually, patrol the flats in coverage. He can hinge around. He's got very good.
Yeah, he was a safety.
Technique.
I mean,
and you can see that background and how he plays. They dropped him into coverage a lot, and he's actually very good at managing hip leverage and flipping his hips and making sure that he stays aligned with receivers. So I think the versatility that Hunt provides right away is appealing. But if he can continue to work on his hand usage and his power channeling, he has all the tools to be a good edge rusher in the NFL. So I'm very bullish on the projection. I think he landed in a good spot where he won't be pressured to be the guy right away.
I want to talk about the 5th round in Philadelphia. They got 3 picks, the Eagles, but 2 particularly come into a situation where the Eagles need some help in that slot receiver position. Anaya Smith from Texas A&M, not the fastest guy in the world, stopwatch-wise, but more quick than fast, manufactured touch player, maybe. I want to hear your thoughts on that. Certainly the Eagles have not shown an ability to take advantage of those types of players. Maybe Kellen Moore changes that. And then Jeremiah Trotter Jr., obviously a big deal here in Philadelphia and for his dad. He's not like his dad. He's not 260 pounds, but those players don't exist anymore. So in a lot of ways, he had to evolve. Your thoughts on him as a potential prospect as well?
Yeah, so I'll start with Anaya Smith. I was thinking he would go in the day 3 range, somewhere around there. I thought there were a few, if you were looking for a wide receiver 3, I thought there were some better options out there. But I do think Anaya Smith does provide a unique element with, like you said, the ability to be schemed touches, right? He started his career as a running back and then switched to wide receiver. And that gadget element is kind of there with this play where you can scheme him touches for sure. And he's dense, he's compact, he's around 5'9", but close to 200 pounds. So, he's pretty rocked up. He's got good mass for his size. He can break tackles. He's got good vision as a ball carrier when you scheme him touches, right? In between the tackles or on sweep motions, right? Get him out into space. And he's got the explosion, the agility, the contact balance to really make the most of those reps. For me, the questions derived from the route tree is still expanding even at this point. And then at the catch point, he's just not going to be a force at the catch point. He doesn't have the largest wingspan. He doesn't have great instincts and body control, right? So in the hands as well can be a little inconsistent. So for me right now, I think his primary function would be as that scheme touch guy. You want to make sure you're going to have to make a more concerted effort to get him the ball. Once you do get him the ball, he can do something with it. He's got all of the rack elements that you want, but he might be a little more confined to that early on. So that's a tricky pick, but I like the projection if you're willing to be creative with the usage there. With Jeremiah Trotter Jr., that was an interesting pick for me because I did really like the 2022 film. The 2023 film regressed a little bit. I know he was dealing with a hamstring injury at times throughout the year, so I'm wondering if he can get back to full strength and full health, might we see a little more of that mobility gleaned out from his style, right? He's one of those, because it's interesting. He's only like around 230, but he is pretty dense and squatty, right? Like he packs a punch at contact. You don't really expect it. So, for me, I'm just at that size at 230, you don't just want to be a Sam linebacker at the NFL level because that's not big enough to be that full-time role. So I'm just curious how much of a multifaceted profile he'll have once he is healthy. And I'm hoping that we can see more of that because in 2022, I really liked his ability to take on blocks at the second level within the tackles, right? In the box, really good with his spatial awareness, knowing how to sidestep and how to flex his body to kind of squirm through and get to the ball carrier. I thought he was very instinctive in that light, using targeted physicality and micro movements to evade blocks and get in the backfield. So I liked that part of his game. I liked the physicality. And there are times where he can patrol those short hook zones in the second level and click and close on routes and recognize intent from the quarterback, right? So I think there's a decent coverage framework to work with. There's a decent run defense framework to work with. And he's a willing blitzer who's got some burst and bend as well. It's just a matter of how high is the ceiling with this pick, right? So I think if he can stay healthy, get healthy, we'll be able to see that. But there is some uncertainty there.
Ian, I want to ask you about the first-round pick, widely regarded as cornerback one of the draft, Quinyon Mitchell. Now he is confirmed to be cornerback one after he went first overall for corners. What do you think his fit is in Philadelphia? Do you like the role? Do you like the fit in Philadelphia? And can he be a day one starter coming into the 2024 season?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I love the fit, and I do think he could be a day one starter. I think, with Vic Fangio, you see a lot of overlapping exotic blitz and rush looks and then overlapped with zone coverage, right? Let those guys play off a little bit and react to the QB, right? And play off of mistakes that the QB makes because of the pressure looks. So I think it's a really fun fit for him because a lot of his bread and butter at Toledo was off man and zone, where he could play a little bit more with space, play reactive instead of trying to be proactive and kind of authoritative at the line and press man. And he can do that. He showed that he can play press if needed at the Senior Bowl, but there is a little less certainty there as opposed to off man and zone, which is kind of where he really perfected his craft in college. He's so good at pedaling, playing off receivers, and then recognizing breaks, keying in on the hips when they break in, and then diverting downfield, getting in front of the pass with that closing speed. And his range as a playmaker is incredible. And then the ball skills to always disrupt the pass and either generate turnovers or generate incompletions. He's one of the best in the class at doing that. So I love the fit. I think it's great because he's a great schematic fit from a coverage perspective, but he can also play off of those rush looks very well, and he can make the QB even more uncomfortable in that light. So love the fit, and I do think he has the processing ability, the technical prowess, and the overall athleticism to be a starter early on.
John, just to follow up if I can. Ian, how much stock, and this is particularly about Quinyon, but more so as a whole when you're analyzing players in the draft and when they go into the NFL, how much stock do you put into the talent that they play against at the collegiate level? We're even seeing it with the Jalix Hunt pick, right? He went to Houston Christian. Who's he playing against? Quinyon Mitchell, Toledo. Who's he playing against? How much stock do you put into that when you're evaluating a player and how they might pan out in the NFL?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think it's one of those things you definitely take notice of it for sure. Like if they play at a certain level, but I think a lot of those top talents, they'll go to an all-star circuit, right? Like Jalix Hunt and Quinyon Mitchell were both at the Senior Bowl. So I think that's a good opportunity. Like, hey, we know they have the talent. Looking at the film, we know they have the talent. We know they were productive. Now the next step is seeing how they perform against comparable competition at an all-star event like the Senior Bowl. And at the Senior Bowl, Quinyon Mitchell was the best corner there, right? At the Senior Bowl, Jalix Hunt actually made an impression with his power against tackles one-on-one and actually proved that he belonged there, right? And then on the flip side, a guy like Willie Drew from Virginia State, who was very productive at Virginia State. He tested very well, but at the Senior Bowl, you could see some technical improvements that he still needed to make, both tracking the football and matching guys that kind of showed, all right, he was basically running off the talent at the FCS level. So there's more refinement needed, right? And that was reflected in his draft capital. I think he might have gone undrafted. So, it's one of those things you take into account for sure when a guy plays at a lower level, but if they're productive, if they're talented, the next step is seeing them in that all-star circuit. And a lot of times they'll confirm it. They belong, right? And I think Quinyon did that. I think Jalix did that. It's not the same for every guy, but that's how you kind of contextualize it in the analysis.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah. All right, Ian, back to the weeds. I want to talk developmental offensive line prospects. The Eagles got 2 of them. They thought Howie Roseman admitted in maybe the deepest offensive line draft at the top in a very long time. He would have been shocked if he didn't come out with one of them, and he didn't. But they did dip into the pool on day 3. Couple interior prospects: Trevor Keegan from Michigan, Dylan McMahon from NC State. 6-round centers are pretty good here in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
I don't expect that out of Dylan McMahon. But your thoughts on Keegan and McMahon?
Yeah, for sure. And I didn't get to watch as much of them as I did other guys, but I was able to see a little bit for sure. Keegan is experienced playing on that Michigan offensive line that won the Joe Moore Award, and he's definitely got experience at the guard spot for sure. With him, athletic enough, very athletic, and I think there's a good functional floor with his knee bend and his ability to cover gaps with that, right? But at the same time, too, a little short-armed as well, and that can contribute to not the best power output at contact, but also he'll lurch a little bit past the center of gravity. It has trouble sustaining blocks at times without that arm length, right? So you see the limitations that come with the physical profile as well as the strengths. But I do think he's got great temperament as a blocker, very physical. He's a finisher. And that whole Michigan offensive line it was kind of a mentality that permeated throughout that unit. So Trevor Keegan was not immune to that. He's very physical. He's a finisher for sure. And you love to see that because it kind of percolates to everyone else. He's athletic enough. He's experienced. Some of the technical deficiencies that come with the lacking arm length, like lurching past your center of gravity, bending at the waist, and kind of dipping your head, can still improve with those things. So I think there's still work to do, but you have an experienced guy who's athletic enough, who's physical. I looked at him as a really good depth pick. I don't know if he's going to be a starter. I don't know if he'll ever be a long-term starter for them. Maybe if he can keep honing in on that technical side and stop lurching, he can become that. But I think right away he does give you security at the guard spot. And I think that's ultimately what, if you can get security, depth for a long time, that's a win. So I liked that pick. And then Dylan McMahon, kind of a similar profile at center, right, where he's a little smaller, definitely shorter arms, and again that translates to, for him, he's squatty, he's low to the ground, so he has that natural leverage where lurching isn't always as big of an issue. But there are times where without that elite reach, some guys can pry past him a little bit. So with McMahon, very good tester, very rangy, very athletic off the snap. He can traverse gaps, he can explode past the 3-tech and seal out, right? But you're still working with a guy who's just generally undersized, and there are things that come with that too. So I think with McMahon, he was honestly a very good value for them. The ideal outcome is that Cam Jurgens switches back to center and becomes a high-level starter, so you can forget about it and just have McMahon as that backup. But overall, I think in round 5 and round 6, you're looking for experience and you're looking for athleticism as well. And at the very least, I think those guys fit those 2 bills.
Ian, I want to ask you about the NFL. It was a great breakdown there of the Eagles draft class. 6 quarterbacks in the top 12. I mean, look, I know everybody wants the next quarterback, but which picks did you like there, and which were you like, look, that's just a severe overreach? I mean, 6 and 12 is just crazy, as a crazy number, and I really wasn't all that high on the class as a whole.
Yeah, for sure. Those top 3 picks, I could see it for all of them. Caleb Williams, obviously, right? No analysis needed there. Jaden Daniels, I think the talent is through the roof with him, and then I think he fits the scheme for Washington as well. So I could see that too. He was my QB3, but I could see it. Drake May, big fan of the value there at number 3. He was one of my top guys, and I think the talent his ceiling is the highest in the class if you can put it all together. So I think all of those 3, I could see it. I wasn't too averse to that. Number 8. Penix going to the Falcons, that was the big one for me. That was the one where I was like, I'm not sure if I see this, right? And, it was a reach on my board, but it wasn't as big of a reach as, say, Kenny Pickett back in 2022, where he went round 1 and he was a mid to late day 2 guy for me. So that was a big reach. Penix was my 33rd overall player, so it wasn't quite as big. It's something that you can rationalize a little more, but at the same time, I don't think he fits the Falcons timeline at all. You just signed Kirk Cousins to a massive
that's the
deal.
thing. You're doing it more from a scouting perspective, Ian, so I get it. But when you pay the other quarterback over $100 million. I mean, what are we doing here if you're the Atlanta Falcons?
And then it does loop back over to the scouting side.
Yeah.
Like with that 8th pick, you could have picked Rome Odunze or Dallas Turner, someone who can help you win right now with Kirk Cousins. Instead, you passed up that opportunity and got a 24-year-old quarterback who probably won't even play until his 3rd or 4th year if things go according to plan with Cousins. So it really didn't make sense to me. I understand if you love the player, take the player because you don't know if a guy like that is going to come around. But I don't think Penix was that level of prospect. So that one confused me. I think that really set the Falcons back for the rest of the class because they're playing catch up on the talent side and they didn't add a wide receiver, which I wanted them to add. So that pick was not, I wouldn't have done that. But Bo Nix at 12 was another one that was a slight reach. But again, I could see the rationale with that a little bit more because I think he's a very good scheme fit for the Broncos. And you needed a quarterback. They had Jarrett Stidham and Zach Wilson in that QB room, right? So if you like Bo Nix enough, yes, invest in that. I think he's a good scheme fit for Sean Payton. I think a lot of the things that Russell Wilson didn't do well, playing, throwing over the middle, playing within the offense, the confines of the offense on rhythm. Bo Nix is good at those things. And he's accurate as well. He's a good athlete, good arm elasticity off platform. So I liked it enough to see it through. Penix, a little more uncertain. And then JJ at number 10, I liked that one too. I think if there's any situation where he can succeed and reach his ceiling, it's Minnesota.
And that's where I was talking to a GM before the draft, Ian, and I said, we all knew Caleb was the top quarterback, and I asked him who was number 2 on his board. And he told me who's going to be in Minnesota because of the fit, the situation, Kevin O'Connell, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. You got offensive tackles with Darrisaw and O'Neal. When you look at it post-draft from a scouting perspective, does that fit, or do you look at it a little bit differently, the situation?
No, it absolutely fits. I was looking at the situations, and I would rank Minnesota number 1 for the ideal, the QB friendly outcome, right? Like they had, like you said, they have the offensive line, they have the weapons in place. They could add a slot receiver, I think, but generally they have enough there. And then they got Kevin O'Connell, who's a great offensive mind, who's shown that he can scheme to QBs. And I think it plays to JJ's strength as well. JJ definitely needs to prove a little more, right? Coming out of college, the question with him was, we know he's talented. We know he's young, right? He's a good leader, but can he elevate the offense when he needs to, right? That was the biggest question that we never really got to see, even when he won the national championship. That said, diagnostic things that you can point to that kind of bode well for his friendliness as an offensive, game manager, field general, right? The efficient mechanics, right? Very good at channeling his energy from his base to his release. Very smooth in that aspect. Very smooth release, very crisp. And then he can work the pocket. He can navigate through creases. He can work off platform on boot action rollouts and play action fakes, right? So all of those things, I think, play into the strengths of the O'Connell system, right? I think you want to keep improving some of the processing field vision aspects. But if you're Kevin O'Connell, you have the supporting structure and the offensive scheme to take a little bit of pressure off McCarthy early on. And you got Sam Darnold as well. So you don't have to start him right away. You can maybe wait a few games and then insert McCarthy. So I think all of the elements, time, support, coaching, they bode very much in favor of McCarthy. And then, you turn back to other guys, right? Like Bo Nix going in Denver. That offensive line is still kind of shaky, right? The wide receiver core, it's not bad, but, there's room to improve it, right? Drake May going to New England. I loved May as a prospect, and I do think they improved a little bit in the draft, but there is still a sense of uncertainty. You don't have the sheer elite talent to support that Minnesota does. And I think that's what puts them ahead.
Wow. What other thing in the first round, Ian, stuck out to you the most? We've talked about the 6 quarterbacks in the top 12. We've talked about the 14 offensive players to start the draft. I don't know what the stat was. That's the first time that's happened. I don't know, maybe ever, John. I'm not sure what the.
Yeah, that was a record, and the previous record was 7. So they shattered it.
They shattered it. They doubled it. So what? Just anything else that really stood out to you in the first round as either, hey, that's great, or the opposite end of the spectrum, hey, that was a terrible move there.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm an easy grader, so there aren't too many things that I'll come out and say, oh, that was terrible, I wouldn't have done that, right? There were a few that surprised me. I think the 49ers going with Ricky Pearsall at 31 was a slight reach on my board again, but I think in that scheme he can be very productive, so it wasn't something that I knocked. I think the Alabama defenders, Terrion Arnold going to the Lions at 24, Dallas Turner going to the Vikings at 17. I thought those were 2 phenomenal value adds because they were both top 10 talents on my board, so I was over the moon for those those two teams getting the talents that they did. I think the offensive tackle class and how that fell out was kind of interesting because Joe Alt went to the Chargers early on. There was speculation that, maybe they would try and trade down to get more capital. They didn't. They chose Joe Alt right there. And a lot of mock drafts, pretty much every other mock draft I did had the Titans taking Alt. So I wonder if that changed their plans.
The
they got
JC Latham stuff, that late, the Eagles, because the Eagles like JC Latham, and somebody down there told me he ain't going to be there.
Yeah.
So they had a good hint that he was going to go top 10. Boy, that surprised me a little bit.
There was a real run on offensive linemen in that round. I think it was 9 offensive linemen, and then they were all tackles, I think, in the first round.
Yep. And there were a few guys like Jordan Morgan and Graham Barton. They're probably going to play inside at the next level, but they played tackle in college. So, it was kind of the inklings that we got leading into the draft that there might be not 8 or 9 or 10 guys going round 1. And that's exactly what happened. So, sometimes it does play out as intended, as planned. So that's the fun part. But Brock Bowers to the Raiders was another kind of surprising fit. I don't think anyone had them picking him. I like it. I don't think he's redundant with Michael Mayer. He's kind of a weapon more so than just a pure tight end. So I liked that one a lot. And then, looking at the board here, there weren't too many big surprises aside from that. I think some of the wide receiver landing spots, I'm intrigued to see what happens. But overall, a pretty chalk round 1 aside from Michael Penix going to 8.
I got to put you on the spot at IC_draft because you're the best in the business. Ian Cummings, Pro Football Network. Make sure you follow him. Everybody, we all love to talk about the first round. You got to hit with your first round picks, but the good teams generally win on day 2 and day 3. Your favorite pick on day 2, your favorite pick on day 3.
That's a good question. My favorite pick on day 3 would probably be Jared Wiley to Kansas City. He was my tight end 3. He was the top 100 player for me. I think the value there could be phenomenal. I think you're looking at a guy who could be the successor truly in that offense. I think the size adjusted fluidity at 6'6", 250, the smooth athleticism up the seam, but the route running ability as well. And then the hands of the catch point. I think he really proved himself to be an asset in the red zone in 2023, but he's got some rack to him as well. I thought Jared Wiley was criminally underrated in this class, and the Chiefs just lucked into him. So to get him, and I think the talent of round 4 is where they got him. That was a phenomenal pick for me. And then round 2, my favorite pick there, I could go, my cliche pick is Johnny Newton to the Washington Commanders because he was a top 15 guy for me. I know he fell because of the medical concerns, but in Dan Quinn's scheme, his ability to rush from 5 tech and 3 tech and even sometimes 7 tech with that flexibility that he has at 6'2", 300 pounds, absolutely absurd. I thought the Commanders had a phenomenal day 2 in general. Picking Johnny Newton, Mike Sainristil was one of my guys from Michigan. That dude is one of the most intelligent physical defensive backs out there. He played the nickel. He can make plays at the catch point, former wide receiver, and then he's got really good communication on the back end as well. And then getting Ben Sinnott, tight end from Kansas State, versatile, very good route runner, very fluid, very explosive, good rack as well. So I think those were a few of my favorite ones. I could keep going down the list, but I think Washington, some of their picks stood out.
I like Washington's draft. No more Daniel Snyder. That's not good news for the Eagles and the other teams in the NFC.
It could be a third contender in the NFC East coming soon with them if Daniels pans out.
Yeah, Daniels, Newton. You mentioned a cornerback from Michigan, Sanat, Brandon Coleman, Luke McCaffrey in the 3rd round. That's a good draft. That's a good draft on paper.
Yep.
All right, Ian, thanks for joining the show, man. As you can probably tell in the chat box, this is why we love getting Ian on. He knows his stuff about these prospects. He breaks them down better than anybody in the business, as Johnny Mac said. Ian Cummings from Pro Football Network. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at IC_draft. Ian, thanks for joining the show, man. It was awesome.
Yes, sir. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ian.
There's Ian Cummings from Pro Football Network. Johnny Mac, I love listening to Ian Cummings. We talked about it a little bit before he came on, but man, that guy can break down a prospect, can he?
Yeah, he's the best in the business, and part of it is you got to get it across when you're in the media, and he just has that ability to immediately make people understand what a player can do well, what maybe he needs to work on, and he knows everybody. I almost took a hiccup when he said he hasn't watched much Trevor Keegan. It's like, probably because Michigan's so good, you just see him in general. But he knows everybody, and it's pretty impressive.
All right, we're going to come back and wrap up this Tuesday edition of Birds 365. The draft is fully settling in now, and fans are starting to, We're starting to analyze more of the picks and how this is going to shake up each roster. John, before we get out of here, I want to ask you about, we just hit on it a little bit with Ian, the NFC East. Commanders have a good draft. The Cowboys are still out there. The Eagles are there.
Cowboys always draft well. I hate,
Yeah,
they're
Eagles
not good
fans
in
don't like
free
to hear that,
agency,
but
but
that's
I talk about Will McClay all the time. He's Baltimore, Dallas drafting. Look to those two teams. Pretty consistent.
So we'll come back and we'll wrap up this Tuesday edition of Birds 365, and we'll touch on the potential power rankings of the NFC East. Stay tuned on Birds 365. We'll close it out next.
Is the best vacation one that you find, or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights, or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm, or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia Dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
Listen, if we even think you owe us money, you won't know what hit you. We'll put liens on everything you own. Raid your bank accounts, retirement fund, pension. You'll open up your paycheck and cry because we'll already have the money. We'll haul you into federal court and you might even go to jail. Hey, it's our job.
Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. Our experts will fight for you using IRS guidelines to stop any IRS actions like bank levies or wage garnishments. Plus, eliminate penalties and interest and reduce your past tax bill so you pay the IRS less. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a tax doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
I'd have my mom call the number on the screen. You come see me alone. We'll work it out. Really, we will.
Philadelphia fans, we're cut from a different cloth. Born into a brotherhood and bonded to our team for life. We believe anything is possible because we've witnessed the impossible. While we may be from different neighborhoods, come Sunday, we are one, and we will be heard. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Running out of time here on Birds 365. Johnny Mac, I do want to ask you about the NFC East, but we'll keep it really quick. But I did just see your tweet. A.J. Brown set to meet with the media today at 1:15 to discuss the contract extension. Are you heading down there to NovaCare to talk to A.J.?
Yeah, I'm going to talk to A.J. Hopefully that nonsense of people saying he could potentially be traded is over. It should be over. It should have never existed. And some other stuff going on. But yeah, I'll be down there to see AJ.
John, real quick, and we'll touch on this a little bit on tomorrow's edition of Birds 365. We did a deep dive breakdown in the last 2 days on the Eagles draft, and we'll start to get into more what the NFC East did. But I think the Commanders have a potential to start to make a splash, maybe not this year, but in the coming years. I'll admit I was a little bit fooled by the start to the Brian Dable era in New York, but they still kind of seem like they're in no man's land now with Daniel Jones. What's your take of the NFC East right now? Eagles still the class of the NFC East?
Yeah, well, Dallas probably was before.
And Dallas
The
did win it last
offseason.
year after the
Yeah,
Eagles collapsed. Yeah.
and Dallas had a very good roster last year as well. They did a very poor job in free agency. Um, and, that has more to do with Jerry and Stephen Jones. But I always say Will McClay should probably leave that organization, but he loves it there, and become a GM. He's one of the best drafting guys in the business. So they're kind of two-pronged. You don't like what they do in free agency, but they're a very good drafting team. Washington, I mentioned. Giants had a good draft, but their draft, at least on paper, and again, we're projecting, but part of that is drafting so high coming off a terrible year. Malik Neighbors is a big-time prospect, a wide receiver. They need desperate help there. Tyler Nubin, probably the best safety in the draft. Andrew Phillips, versatile defensive back. The Eagles had a lot of interest in him. Theo Johnson, one of the best tight ends in the draft, at least projecting. So they did okay, but they got a long way to go. They're a bad football team. And Daniel Jones should settle down a little of the issues. Obviously, he's better than Tommy DeVito and Tyrod Taylor, but yeah, they have some issues. And now they don't have Saquon Barkley to lean on in the running game.
Right.
So they look like they took a step back. And they wanted a quarterback. They were one of those teams that they were trying to get Drake May as well. Minnesota and the Giants were trying to trade up for Drake May. And then the Giants were like, all right, we don't want any of the other guys. The Vikings obviously had to take a quarterback. So, but they both wanted Drake May, tried to get the Patriots to come out of number 3 overall.
Yeah, I like Malik Neighbors. I just wonder, I don't like the quarterback. Wide receivers are dependent on the person that's getting them the football. So if Daniel Jones is Daniel Jones.
Well, it depends who you're grading him against. If you're grading him against Tommy DeVito, Daniel Jones looks awful good. If you're grading him,
I'm grading him against Jalen Hurts and Dak Prescott.
Yeah, then you probably don't like Daniel Jones. Yeah.
All right, me and Johnny Mac will kick that around a little bit tomorrow, the NFC East, and what the projections for that might be. Johnny Mac, good show today. I thought both of our guests, Tommy Lawler and Ian Cummings, gave great breakdowns on the prospects the Eagles added. So you'll have a good day today down at NovaCare talking to A.J. Brown, or A.J. Owens, as Celia likes to call him. He stirred the pot a little bit. Devontae was chirping back at him.
And Dan doesn't know a thing about A.J. Brown, sorry to say.
Yeah, you say that all the time, that AJ and Slay are the two most misunderstood guys on the Eagles. So we'll hear from AJ Brown later today. Johnny Mac, thanks for the show today. We'll talk to you tomorrow morning on Birds 365.
Let's do it.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.